Hey there, hope you're doing well. If you have wondered if it is true that you have to get out of bed if you're not sleeping, then this episode is for you. It's an important one because this question comes up all the time. And I'll actually share with you that the short answer is no, you don't. But in this episode, we'll really see why I say that. And I want to share with you that the reason I'm doing this episode today is actually because this question came up today. It was a question from a client who had actually been told by their therapist that they should leave the bed if they're awake at night because studies have shown that you should do this. So I think it's a really important one to get to the bottom of this one. So actually, the kind of like I only give you a short answer. Now I'm going to give you kind of a medium answer here, which is basically this one before we really get into it. It is, if you imagine like a spectrum, you have on one end, you have somebody who never really thinks about sleep. They don't even have a relationship with sleep. They never thought about sleep. It's kind of like breathing. It just happens. They sleep really well, right? That's one end of the spectrum. And then you have the other end of the spectrum. You have somebody who is having rituals. Maybe they're taking medications, they're taking potions, they're taking they're using gadgets, and they're struggling with sleep. They're really struggling with sleep. This person with all this stuff going on, they have a lot of rules. Their life may be consumed by rules, and the other person has absolutely no rules at all, right? So you can already sense just from this that, of course, you want to be the person who has no rules, right? That's where you want to be. So already from that, you can see that any rule that is like, if you're this, then you have to do this, is not the way to go. I recently learned this quote. It's apparently Martin Luther King quote where he said that if it's peace we want, then our means must be peaceful. And it's kind of the same thing with sleep. If we want to sleep in peace, have peaceful sleep, our means should be peaceful. We don't want to engage in any rules or regulations or anything like that. But okay, let's get into it. That was a long preamble there. But what I want to share with you today is first, we're going to talk about something that's called conditional arousal and something called stimulus control. We're going to see why the problems are with this, and then what you should do to sleep really well. So what is conditioned arousal? Well, this is really the root of it. This is where all this comes from, the idea that you have to leave the bed if you're not sleeping. And it's rooted in kind of like classical psychological teaching. And when applied to sleep, it goes something like this. You have started associating the bed with being awake, kind of like your body has started associating the bed with being awake. And that's why you now become awake as soon as you go to bed. Right? That's kind of the idea, that this association conditioning has formed, and that's portrayed as a problem, right? That's what was portrayed like. So the solution that has been produced here is stimulus control, which is, so therefore, because you have this association now, you should leave the bed when you're awake and only go back when you're sleepy, so that so that what? So what's the goal with that? Well, the goal is to create a new conditioning, a new association of the bed as a place where you sleep. Sounds pretty good, right? Sounds pretty logical. Why is this attractive? Well, it is for that reason. It's kind of straightforward. It's a very straightforward explanation, straightforward problem, and a straightforward solution. It's like very attractive for somebody who is a therapist or even a coach. It's also sort of attractive for you if you have trouble sleeping. It sounds like, okay, I got this. Sounds pretty straightforward. Let me do this. But you'll see that there are a number of problems. Actually, we'll go through the problems with all these three components here. So what's the first one? So the problem with the first one is that the conditioning, or sorry, with the three problems rather. Sorry, the three problems are that, number one, this conditioning that is reported is it's not true. It's not the true conditioning that is being reported here. Number two, this time component, or not only time component, but this component of like you have to do this so that you can associate the bed with sleep again. That adds like a level of performance anxiety. And number three, that associations cannot be forced or willfully produced. And we'll see that these are the main three problems. So let's go over it. So in this first, to talk about this problem with conditioning, that it's not true that this conditioning of the bed is a place where you're awake. It's not really, that's not true. And this is an example of that. So if we imagine two people, Joe has some financial problems and he spends all day in his bed, anxious and worried and calculating, right? But he sleeps just fine. Joanna, on the other hand, she has a lot of sleep anxiety, and she waits as long as she can to go to bed. She doesn't want to go to bed because of all the trouble sleeping she's had. So she actually doesn't spend much time in bed, but she has a lot of struggles with sleep. How is this possible? How can this be? How can it be that Joe, who spends all his time in his bed anxious and awake, still sleeps well, but Joanna doesn't? Well, you probably figured out already. Joe isn't worried about his sleep. There are other things that he worries about, but sleep isn't on his radar. So even if he spends hours in his bed awake at night, during the day, etc., no problem. Joanna, on the other hand, she is worried about her sleep. So if something like she sees a cat yawning, oh my gosh, she starts thinking about, oh no, I can't sleep. What's going to go? So for her, anything, including a cat yawning, that makes her think about her problem sleeping is a trigger. So you can see that it's not like the bed, the linens, the pillowcase, they're not more of a culprit than a cat yawning. And nobody tells you to avoid cats yawning. That also gives you a sense that that's not where it's at. So the conditioning that causes insomnia, the association that causes insomnia is the pairing of wakefulness and fear. The fear of being awake. That's the conditioning. That's the two conditioned things that drive insomnia. And again, the linens, the pillow covers for the bed, the yawning cat, they are of no importance, really. They are of no importance to us. So the first problem we talked about that is that conditioning is not true. That is not a true conditioning. Number two, if you're told to get up, and this is the most kind of like problematic one, when you're told like you have to get up in 20 minutes if you haven't fallen asleep, and then you go somewhere else, and only when you feel sleepy you go back to bed, and now you have another 20-minute opportunity to fall asleep. You can just imagine, just thinking about that causes so much anxiety. It's like, okay, it's like the internal clock is on, right? And the external one too, because you've been told 20 minutes, so of course you're going to do 20 minutes. You're going to have an alarm like 20 minutes. Okay, it's been 19. I have 1 minute. 1 minute's down. Like I have 18 minutes now, 17 minutes, 15 minutes. Okay, I only have 10 minutes to sleep. Oh no! You can sense that is very problematic when you have that strict time component. But even without it, even if you're simply told like leave the bed if you can't fall asleep or if you don't fall asleep, and only go back when you fall asleep, there's still that performance anxiety. Okay, I left the bed, now I feel sleepy, now I got to get into bed, now I got to sleep in the bed, otherwise I have to leave it again. Not helpful. This performance anxiety is the second problem here. And we talked about even without the 20-minute rule, there is performance anxiety. And number three, this is a very important one. The whole premise of stimulus control is that you can sort of willfully create associations, But what is an association? Association is really a thought. So here's kind of a silly example, but let's say you started associating emails. When you see an email from your boss, you become kind of scared just by seeing it. Then if somebody told you, well, okay, this association has started happening, we got to change that. So you should only open these emails when you feel happy. You can just sense that that's not going to change anything, because that's not the level where this is at. It's not about like being happy when you open the email or you look at your emails. That's not going to change anything. There's something else going on between you and your boss, your workplace, etc. That's what you should look at. Same thing here. So associations are thoughts, right? And thoughts cannot be artificially or willfully controlled or manipulated. You cannot make yourself think something. You cannot force yourself to believe something. Beliefs and thoughts, they happen by themselves. They happen organically. And so more importantly is like when you have a certain thought, then the more you start forcefully trying to change that, the more entrenched that thought becomes. As if you have any type of idea and a friend of yours is trying to convince you like, no, you're wrong, listen to me, you're totally wrong, then you get like, wait a minute, no, I think I'm right, I have valid reasons to believe that. So the more you try to forcefully change a thought or forcefully create an association, and when that becomes a goal and like an achievement type of thing, then the opposite happens. The original thought and the original association becomes even more entrenched. So I think with that, we've really we've really seen the problems with this idea, this kind of confused idea about conditioned arousal and stimulus control. So what should you do? Well, one thing that I hope is very clear here is that the root for all struggle sleeping is that you have started thinking, or rather your brain has started thinking, it's not even you, it's kind of just like your brain, that safety system inside it, has started to think that being awake at night is a threat and problem, something it has to make go away, escape from, and that is where all the trouble sleeping comes from. That's the conditioning, that's the association that we should work on. So how do you do that? Well, it's with what I call befriending wakefulness. Move towards, ever so little, move towards more okayness with that state of wakefulness occurring even when it is night. And guess what? It does not matter where you are. You can befriend wakefulness from your bed. From your very comfortable, nice bed, you can befriend wakefulness. You can befriend wakefulness from the living room or from the kitchen. Like, it doesn't matter. But when you find yourself awake at night, that is your opportunity to do something that makes it okay to be awake. And again, it doesn't matter what that is either. It doesn't matter if it is reading or listening to a podcast or watching some Netflix and things of that nature. Sometimes people are like, isn't that going to make me more awake? If you think that, you're onto something big, which is you've truly identified the fear of being awake. Even more reason, if you had that thought, to go towards befriending wakefulness. Other things that help, that I often talk about, is the timeless way, not knowing what time it is at night. And also, I was just going to say that oftentimes the screens are fine in themselves, but the time element can be a little tricky there. But otherwise, anything really that you do at night that makes it okay to be awake is what really, truly helps. So I hope this made sense to you. If you have a comment, please post it here. If you've been told to do stimulus control and want to share your story about that, please do. If you have a question for open class, you can head over to thesleepcoachschool.com and check and click on the link up top there. And that is also where you can learn about ways to work with myself if you would like to do that. So hope this helped, and look forward to having you back real soon. Tomorrow, by the way, a real hero guesting the channel, Alexei Guze, who single-handedly debunked the book Why We Sleep. He's really, really helped solve so much sleep anxiety. So really excited having him here. All right, I'll see you tomorrow, and until then, take it easy.